It's been a busy week for every element of the Starship program. You name it, we've got updates on it. The FAA reveals the Starbase Giga Bay will be different from the one in Florida. We have major progress on Pad B's OLM construction. There's a vote to determine the future of Starbase, and it wouldn't be Starbase without road closures, which just might mean it is finally time for Ship 35 to shine. Wait, no, that's Ship 36. Once again, let's start off the week with the construction of more housing space in Boca Chica. Here we can see that the week started with more foundation and groundwork. There's not really that much structural progress yet, but with the swamp that Boca Chica can be, structural ground preparation can be half of the work. Adjacent to the construction work, we can see one of the voting signs presently displayed in Boca Chica. This pertains to an ongoing election of considerable significance for the future of Starbase, both in the immediate and more distant sense. The election in question is currently underway and will conclude on the 3rd of May. The purpose of this vote is to determine whether to establish the City of Starbase as a Type C general law municipality, thereby rendering it independent from the jurisdiction of Brownsville. Should the vote be successful, Starbase will have its own mayor and 2 city commissioners. The election for these positions are being held alongside the vote itself, and on the ballot for mayor is SpaceX's security manager, Gunnar Milburn. Standing for commissioner are SpaceX operations engineering manager, Jenna Pertzelka, and senior director for environmental health and safety, Jordan Buss. This would grant SpaceX far greater control over access and restrictions in the area around Starbase in the future, as well as influence over property taxes and other matters. While this could certainly benefit SpaceX's operations in the area, it remains to be seen what implications this might have for things like camera access and the documentation of events. Only time will tell. Of course, no week goes by at the moment without saying farewell to more sections of the old high bay. A fairly sizable portion, complete with some of the pre-cut openings, was removed in the early hours of Monday. In case you were wondering, we're pretty sure that these cutouts are designed to reduce the amount of air flowing through the structure, thereby minimizing the aerodynamic forces and making the entire process safer and more manageable. At night especially, this demolition work sends a shower of sparks flying in the high bay. SpaceX is constantly grinding away and pulling apart bits of the building, racing to get the Giga Bay built as quickly as they can. Regarding the Giga Bay, recent findings from an FAA document shed light on the proposed structure at Starbase. The document indicates that the Giga Bay in Boca Chica is planned to stand at 117.3 meters tall, slightly higher than the proposed 115.8 meters proposed for the Giga Bay at SpaceX's Roberts Road facility at the Kennedy Space Center. It also provides the coordinates for the Boca Chica site. Annoyingly, the work schedule section remains blank, leaving us without a timeline for construction. However, it's likely that work will commence once the existing structures are cleared. This leaves us with the question, why is SpaceX designing the Boca Chica Giga Bay to be taller than its Floridian counterpart? It's possible that one of the documents is yet to be updated and both structures may end up sharing the same design. Alternatively, site-specific restrictions such as environmental regulations, local zoning, or operational needs might be driving the use of different designs. For instance, Boca Chica's role as SpaceX's primary testing and production hub for Starship may necessitate the additional height for specialized equipment or assembly processes compared to the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral, which is more focused on operational launches. Only time will tell, but we'll be able to compare the two once construction gets underway. Thanks to our SBR operator Need Pizza, by the way, who caught that FAA document. In other infrastructure news, SpaceX has begun work on the second phase of the roundabout near the beach. This will facilitate smoother turns and returns to and from the beach, while also providing fuel tankers servicing the tank farm with a simpler way to maneuver without crossing oncoming traffic. With the other side already underway, the project could be completed in just a few weeks. That's not the only spot where SpaceX and the county are making changes to the roads. Highway 4 is also being expanded with additional lanes to cope with the steadily growing traffic, as we've noted before. You can already spot some of this construction just before the highway reaches Starbase, right before the road veers left towards the site. Let's take a look at Ship 37, one of the forthcoming vessels in SpaceX's Starship program. It's still being assembled in Mega Bay 2 at Starbase, but on Monday it received some fresh hardware. The press pipes, which regulate tank pressure within the ship, were hoisted up to the vehicle for fitting. You can see the first of these being lifted and installed on the ship. The second press pipe was hoisted up shortly after, so they fitted both in one go. These pipes work by recycling tank pressure from the engines. As the engines draw from the tanks, pressure would naturally drop. SpaceX counters this by using the engines to feed back that lost pressure, repressurizing the tanks. On the ship, 2 press pipes are fitted, 1 for each tank, whereas the booster has 4. Meanwhile, you can see that Ship 37's thermal protection system still has a fair way to go. There are large gaps at the top, and some of the lower barrels haven't got any TPS fitted yet. To be fair though, Ship 36 is next in line for cryo testing, so there's still some time for Ship 37 to progress and be finished. But the progress with Ship 37 isn't the only thing moving forward. Ship 38 is also being built in Mega Bay 2, and on Tuesday we saw its PEZ dispenser being shifted to the bay. This structure will be used to load Starlink satellites and, with any luck, deploy them into space if Ship 38 makes it that far. The PEZ dispenser was then hoisted by crane and positioned on one of the appropriate work platforms inside Mega Bay 2. There it will be joined with its rings and readied for assembly into a complete ship. Over on the booster side of things, Booster 16 is still being finalised following its cryogenic proof testing. The booster is currently housed in Mega Bay 1, having completed its cryoproofs on February 28th and March 4th. Now back in the bay, it's being fitted with engines and grid fins. Speaking of grid fins, one was lifted inside Mega Bay 1 and fitted to the booster on Thursday night. On Monday, Test Tank 17 was moved from Mega Bay 1 to the Starfactory for further work and outfitting, offering a wonderful opportunity to examine the next generation booster test tank and discuss its various features and peculiarities. As a reminder, Test Tank 17 is just a fan name given to this article by the community, as there haven't been any labels spotted or official names given like previous test tanks at Starbase. It's believed that Test Tank 17 is intended to validate a new landing tank, as well as the redesigned booster aft section, while also testing the general structural integrity of this new aft section. At the top, you can observe this blue ring and several hooks which are designed to secure the test tank to the Massey structural test stand. We've recently seen modifications to this stand, and it was always suspected that Test Tank 17 would be the next to be tested there. This move confirms those suspicions. In an earlier flyover, you can see how the ring will attach to the blue hooks at the top of the test tank, which will then be secured to the structural test stand. Further down, there's a fairly standard booster common dome, also known as an E-dome. As expected, this serves to seal the booster. There's nothing particularly novel here. Moving lower, you'll notice 2 large holes. In total, there are 5 of these around the test tank. These holes provide access to connect actuators to the booster landing tank, which is welded inside the test tank. No, sorry to disappoint, they're not the HLS thrusters. But don't shoot the messenger. This new booster landing tank design will be subjected to pushing and pulling forces by these actuators to verify the structural integrity and weld strength of the booster aft and landing tank. On the test stand, this is one method to apply stress, alongside the blue hooks at the top, which will also connect to actuators capable of crushing, twisting and pulling the tank. The testing doesn't end there. At the bottom, there will be 33 thrust rounds attached to the booster to mimic the distributed thrust of all of the Raptor engines pushing against the aft section of the booster. At the aft end, you'll also notice some peculiar open cutouts. We suspect these are designed to connect to a new version of hold-down clamp that SpaceX is introducing, though we'll touch more on that later. The test tank also has some other structural marks or stamps at the bottom, which we can't yet identify. All in all, Test Tank 17 is a remarkably versatile tool for structural testing of the next generation booster. SpaceX appears to have crafted a comprehensive solution for all aspects of the booster aft section. It's set to connect over 70 actuators for its structural tests, which is quite extraordinary. Once the test tank was relocated, it was conveniently positioned right in front of the Starfactory window. This should make it easier to observe any further modifications as they prepare it for testing and rollout. This week, Test Tank 17 also stirred up some confusion regarding the naming of future boosters. Initially, based on Elon Musk's last presentation about a year ago, we assumed that the upcoming booster, starting with Booster 18, would be dubbed Version 2, or Block 2, or Starship 2, depending on if you asked Elon, the people who wrote the labels, or SpaceX. However, that appears to have shifted. Test Tank 17 was on board a transport stand labelled V3 Aft Cart, indicating that the booster this tank represents is now referred to as Version 3, not Version 2. There's further evidence to support this. During the rollout of Booster 17, SpaceX's lead designer for Starship stands responded to an ex-post by Starship Gazer stating that this booster would be the final V2 booster proved. Even though Booster 17 is of the same aesthetic generation as Flight 3's Booster 10, which was very clearly marked as not Starship 2 in Elon Musk's presentation. So What does this all mean? Somewhere between Booster 1 and Booster 17, SpaceX has decided to retroactively designate them as V2, and now Booster 18, along with Test Tank 17, falls under what is now called V3, previously referred to as Starship 2 in Elon Musk's most recent presentation. SpaceX's naming conventions can be rather perplexing, and Super Heavy is no exception. Falcon 9 fans will know that somehow we started with V1.0, ended up with Block 5, and had V1.2 full thrust somewhere in the middle, whatever that means. Personally, I'm looking forward to the 35-engine Super Heavy being called Starship Block 3 V2 Gigathrust Plus. Over at the launch site, SpaceX also made use of Tuesday for further chopstick testing. You can see the Pad A chopsticks raised here, moving up and down and around the tower. This continues the ongoing trend of the past few weeks, with frequent tests on both sets of chopsticks at Pad A and Pad B. Once more, these tests don't seem to centre on the usual lifting operations, but instead involve a series of slower and faster catch manoeuvres. While Pad B's chopsticks have mostly remained grounded over the past few weeks, Pad A's are being tested up in the air at the catch position, further discrediting the rumour that Booster 14 will be intentionally thrown into the ocean during the next flight. And yet again on Tuesday, SpaceX carried out another round of intensive testing with the Pad A chopsticks, conducting catch tests for over 2 hours without pause. Another trend we've noticed over the past few weeks is that when Pad A undergoes testing on one day, Pad B almost invariably follows with a similar testing sequence the next day. This pattern held true this week as well, with Pad B's chopsticks in action on Wednesday following Pad A's tests on Tuesday. As before, Pad B conducted its tests closer to the ground, likely due to the ongoing work in the area. Performing tests at a lower height seems a sensible way to minimise risk. The test lasted roughly an hour and included several high-speed catch closings. Before we shift our focus to the upcoming flight critical hardware, here's a brief update from SpaceX's testing facility in McGregor. Our team there has set up a new camera site which on its first day captured sightings of a Falcon 9 second stage, an entirely new Falcon 9 first stage, and an exceptionally pristine Raptor vacuum engine. While it doesn't appear to be a Raptor 3 vacuum as originally hyped, it does appear to be an impressively clean Raptor 2 vacuum that passed by the cameras. Unfortunately, the serial number wasn't visible, which would have confirmed whether it is a Raptor V3 or Raptor V2. Still, it looks like a cracking spot to catch such sightings in the near future. A big thanks to Das, Adam Gage and the rest of the McGregor Live team who helped to get all of the equipment set up in just a couple of days. Since the start of the week, SpaceX has conducted 2 Raptor vertical stand tests, each lasting 260 seconds. The Raptor horizontal stands have been even busier, with 8 tests over the last week. These 260-second tests, or 4 minutes and 20 seconds, are likely indicative of Raptor version 3 tests. It seems SpaceX chose the cheekiest duration they could think of. Regardless, Raptor 3 has clocked up roughly 9 more minutes of testing and firing time this week, with no explosions or other dramatic observations. If you're ever bored of waiting for the next Starship test on Starbase Live, there'll be plenty of action within the span of a few hours, available 24/7 on McGregor Live. Let's turn our attention to one of the main focal points in recent weeks, the construction and preparation of the second Starbase Orbital Launch Mount. We've spotted another crucial component for the OLM's construction, the launch clamps. These will secure the V3 next generation boosters and will be released just before the launch to free the vehicle. Recall those gaps we mentioned on Test Tank 17, which might be for securing future boosters? These clamps are likely the ones that will attach to those gaps. Over at the pad itself, the structure is looking increasingly complete, with the deluge pipes for the deck now being connected. There's still plenty of scaffolding to be set up, and some gaps remain unfilled with piping, but it's definitely getting there. Some of the larger corner pipes are still lying about next to the pad, wrapped in protective foil, as they're not yet ready to be installed. Their presence, however, suggests that SpaceX is nearing the point of connecting all of those deluge pipes very soon. Over the last week, it appears that SpaceX made an attempt, or at the very least conducted a fit check, to install one of the hold-down arms on the new Pad B Orbital Launch Mount. A crane hoisted the structure into the mount, where the clamps will connect to the booster, and it remained there for quite a while. Afterwards, it was lifted out again and not fully installed. It's difficult to determine whether this was a halted installation attempt or simply a fit check, but it at least confirms that SpaceX plans to install these hold-down arms at the production site, at least for the time being. Over at the massive Pad B connector gantry, more concrete is being poured, while workers are busy connecting various pumps and piping within the structure. This gantry will be crucial for relocating the plumbing from the new pad to this secondary structure, marking one of the most significant changes from Pad A. Another critical component for the pad's construction is of course the flame diverter. Last week we saw both sides of the flame diverter being installed, and now we turn to joining them together with the central piece. This central part is quite a fascinating structure. You can see where the green deluge pipe connects to it on the left before it channels water to the other pipes and distributes it from there. There's also another outlet on the opposite side to direct additional water further into the system. This piece will sit atop both angled flame diverter sections, serving as the main connector. Its heavily reinforced top is noticeable, designed to deflect the intense flames from 33 Raptor engines to both sides. This part's durability is particularly crucial as it will be the closest part to the engines. The day after its arrival, SpaceX lifted the top cap of the flame diverter and fitted it onto the two previously installed sides. With that, the entire flame diverter structure is now in place within the trench, and the next step is to connect it up to the rest of the water deluge plumbing. Last week, we discussed the Orbital Launch Mount legs at length and how they could prove quite useful for removing the pad. This week, we spotted another one being delivered to the launch site as it passed the production site cameras on a flatbed. SpaceX isn't dawdling with these legs as they began positioning them inside the flame trench rather promptly. This is where they'll be secured to support the launch mount once it's finished. The leg lifts were completed quite swiftly, and after their placement, the crane remained attached briefly to provide stability while the legs were bolted into place. Following the first leg a few hours later, SpaceX positioned the second orbital launch mount leg into the ground and secured it. This positioning confirmed our suspicions from last week that the new mount design will feature only 4 legs versus pad A6. The massive legs were also ground down overnight. It appears some adjustments are being made now that they're in position at the pad. On Wednesday, SpaceX got straight to work with the 2 remaining legs for the orbital launch mount. Early in the morning, one of the 2 missing legs was already being attached to the crane, and soon after it was lifted into place. A bit later, the same process followed for the 4th and final leg. With all 4 legs now in place, it's a matter of reinforcing and securing them. Once that's complete, we'll see if the next step is installing the orbital launch mount itself, and hopefully after that, a test of the entire deluge system in one go. This system is on a completely different level compared to Pad A's steel plate, so I'm looking forward to what this water suppression system looks like. While the base of Pad B is undoubtedly crucial, the walls also need to be quite robust as they'll face significant forces. SpaceX is employing prefabricated wall segments to strengthen the sides of the flame trench. On Wednesday morning, SpaceX lifted several of these flame trench wall segments and fitted them to Pad B. Of course, with such a large pad construction, the devil's in the details. It's encouraging to see SpaceX also handling smaller components like this pipe as they delve deeper into the intricate work of connecting the pad. Okay, so we've checked off the infrastructure, the politics, the prototypes and the launch pad, so all that's left to talk about now is how things are progressing towards the 9th flight of the Starship Super Heavy stack. Checking in with Booster 14-2, we can see it stationed in Mega Bay 1, complete with its hot staging ring installed and all grid fins fitted. It appears to be ready, merely awaiting its ship, with little left to do on the booster itself. Another question is, why hasn't SpaceX placed Booster 14-2 back onto Pad A's launch mount if it's ready? I'd argue there are several reasons for this. Firstly, it's better protected inside Mega Bay 1 while it waits. Secondly, if adjustments are needed, it's far easier to do them there, and there's simply no need to roll it out until the ship is ready. Lastly, SpaceX might have enough time to static fire another booster, such as Booster 16, before Booster 14-2 is needed for flight, making the most of their available time. If such an event were to happen, it would allow SpaceX to perform a condensed turnaround time between flights 9 and 10. This is of course assuming that Ship 35 doesn't illustrate the point-to-point capabilities again, demonstrating rapid stainless steel delivery from South Texas to the Caribbean. Regarding Ship 35, we're yet to see any developments. As of this video's writing, SpaceX hasn't rolled out Ship 35 and we're still without updates on its status, having not caught sight of it for quite a while. However, there are a few hints. The Cameron County website SpaceX page has announced new road closures for transport operations, which started on Saturday with closures from midnight to 4 in the morning and noon to 4 in the afternoon, as well as a morning closure on Monday, the day of this episode's release, and a late overnight road delay from 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. Each road delay notice shares the same wording but with different times, facilitating the movement of hardware from the Starfactory to the Massey's test site. Interestingly, 3 vehicles could be involved. Test Tank 17, which appears to be waiting at the Starfactory, Ship 35, which we've been expecting to roll out to the test site for a few weeks, and Ship 36, which seems ready for its cryogenic testing phase. As of recording, Ship 36 has emerged from Mega Bay 2, utilising the afternoon closure window on Saturday the 26th. No vehicle utilised the Saturday morning closure window. If we get to see 2 Starships at Massey's, that would be pretty special, although I'm not 100% sure whether the tank storage capacity is big enough to support parallel processing of the cryogenic proof stand and the ship's static fire stand. Nonetheless, this raises hopes for a rollout and test campaign in the very near future, fingers crossed, potentially paving the way for a launch as early as mid-May. For completeness, it's worth noting that neither SpaceX nor the FAA has yet announced the closure of the Flight 8 mishap investigation or issued a postponement with a safety report. This means, technically, Starship remains regulatorily grounded. However, the outcomes of Ship 35's testing could move this process along. The most likely scenario is that SpaceX simply hasn't submitted the required paperwork to the FAA because they haven't finished investigating the mishap themselves, suggesting this isn't a major hurdle but rather a box yet to be ticked. Once Ship 35 conducts its static fire, it will roll back for inspections and then head to the launch site with Booster 14-2 for stacking and eventual launch. Whether there will be tanking tests or a wet dress rehearsal campaign remains uncertain for now. Let's all keep our fingers crossed for an exciting Ship 35 test this week. But that being said, do you think we'll see a normal few second static fire, another 60-second static fire, maybe a ship header tank static fire? Let us know what you think. For now, I've been Ryan Caton for NSF, thanks for watching, and goodbye.